Do you want to see better in Warzone and Modern Warfare 3? Well, you're in the right place, because today I'm sharing with you the best updated graphics settings for consoles on Warzone. So whether you're hot dropping Superstore or hitting up Rebirth Island, you're gonna want these settings on. And we start with on-demand texture streaming. I recommend switching this off. Generally, it's gonna reduce the amount of visual bugs you're gonna get, but also reduces the bandwidth and demand on your system. So in theory, our ping should be that little bit better, and so should our FPS. And to be honest, when switching this on, you don't notice a huge difference. For world and weapon motion blur, I recommend switching these off. It's much easier to see with these off, although some people in my videos have suggested by having motion blur on, it actually enhances frames per second. Now, I have done a little bit of testing around this, and it seems to have a negligible impact. So I wouldn't worry about that too much, and I'd just switch them off. And then the same goes for film grain. This setting actually looks pretty cool, I think, but by switching it off, it can allow us to see one or two more enemies. For depth of field, switch this off as well. This reduces the blurring that occurs when we're aiming down our sights. But just before we get into the rest of the settings, if you're looking to unlock Modern Warfare 3 camos completely legitimately, or play in bot lobbies, get all the best schematics, or the brand new nuke skin, be sure to check out Mitch Cactus. They're the biggest and most reliable sellers with loads of new offerings for Modern Warfare 3 with completely safe and legitimate services. These guys have well over 10,000 verified reviews on Trustpilot, and be sure to use code SPRING for 5% off for a limited time only. Okay, now back to the settings. Then for Fidelity FX CAS, this is a software sharpening tool that can fix some of those kind of blurry images you can get. Now the issue is that this setting and the strength is gonna change depending on your system. So if you're on an older generation system, I would recommend switching it off altogether, or if you are gonna switch it on, put the strength on quite a low number. Blurriness isn't always a massive issue on those systems, and they don't have that much processing power to spare these days. Whereas on newer generation consoles, I recommend switching it on and going 70 and above. Now again, it's going to depend on your system itself and sometimes the monitor you're using as well. But for me, on a high spec monitor and an Xbox Series X, this is what I use. It's definitely worth playing around with though. For 120Hz refresh rate, make sure this is enabled. This is the setting that allows you to play on 120 frames per second. Again, this is only applicable to newer generation consoles and PC players, and of course is only applicable if you've got a TV or monitor that can actually play on that. For field of view, I've gone 110, but anywhere over 100 will do. One thing to keep in mind though is that the higher your FOV goes, the lower your frames per second will go. For aiming down sight field of view, put this on affected. This makes it so when you aim in, you're still at the FOV setting that we've just set above it. And then for weapon field of view, put it on wide, and it'll make the weapon look marginally smaller. But the advantage is it does allow us to see more of the environment. For camera movements, put this on least, which is 50%. And then for brightness, I've gone for 60, but somewhere between 55 and 65 will work as well. Now that Ashika Island is gone, we don't need to crank it up as much since that was quite a dark map, but mixed with the other settings we're going over in this video, it's nice to have it a little bit brighter because the images just pop a little more. For safe area, I always recommend going as narrow as possible with this. This just brings things like the minimap a little bit closer to the center of the screen. The advantage being, it reduces the amount of time that we're having to track from the center of the screen in our aim up to the corner on the minimap to see the red dots, then back to the center. The more time you spend doing this, the more you're gonna miss. Now we're not quite finished there for the graphics, because now we want to head over to interface, and specifically we want to head to color customization. The HUD color palette doesn't matter too much. The important settings here are color filter settings. We want to put this on filter 2 and then put the world color intensity all the way up to 100. So obviously on consoles, we don't have the advantage of advanced graphics cards being editable like you would with Nvidia or something like that. So in the absence of being able to do all that tweaking, this filter actually does a pretty good job, to be honest. Now, if you wanted to enhance some of those settings even more, you could head onto your monitor and do some further tweaking, but maybe I'll make a video on that in the future, since this is going to be very dependent on certain things, and if you're looking for some quick graphic settings, this probably isn't the place to do it. Hopefully this does get your game looking much better this season though. And now that we're finished up here, why don't you join me in one of these videos where I go over the best controller settings this season, or even over here where I show you how to rank up weapons as fast as possible this season as well.